So thank you so much, Flora, for the opportunity to present in the webinar, and thank you so much for the good introduction. And thank you, Olli. I think Olli's presentation played a lot of ground and foundation for what I'm going to say now. So there's a lot of things that I can build on what Olli already said. So my name is Joonas Lehtovaara. I work as a construction management unit in A-insinöörit, which is an engineering office in Finland. I work as a development manager, and as Roar mentioned, I have a PhD degree, which I did in TAKT production in the last few years. I've been working with the company for a year and a half now. So what I would like to share with you today in the next 20 minutes or so is 3 stories, basically telling how I ended up working with TAKT production, which kind of things I've been working with the last few years. And a lot of things that I tell here is tied to what Olli already said. So I've been part of the Building 2030 consortium. I started working with TAKT in 2018. So a lot of things that has been happening in Finland in the Finnish industry are tied to my story as well. And the building blocks I built here are a lot of the same that the Finnish construction industry has learned regarding TAKT. So first, a little bit about the first TAKT project that I did by myself, and actually the first project that we scientifically documented here in Finland, 2018-19. Then a little bit about how this collaboration, integration of different parties came to be a big thing regarding or related to TAKT production, how we tried to solve that. And then last couple of words about this bigger picture and the idea that when we're doing really well in individual projects, how we could drive bigger change than, for example, how integrating client to the process could help us doing better TAKT production over the projects. So let's begin with the first project that I did TAKT production with. So this happened in 2018. We documented cases in 2019, 18 and 19. Olli already showed a little pictures of these cases. So the cases that I was involved in were 2 residential projects back in Helsinki, Finland. And we utilized 1 day TAKT time for this project. And they were residential projects that we did TAKT time mostly in the interior phase of the projects. And for the other project, I was doing or collecting data as a PhD student. And for the other project, in addition of being a PhD student, I already also worked as a development engineer for the company. So I was also able to look for the business side of the project as well, and dig a little bit deeper how the business adjusted with the TAKT production. And what we saw there with the first project was that we were able to reduce the duration quite a lot. As Olli mentioned, we were able to achieve this 1/3 duration reduction in the interior phase with doing TAKT with 1 day TAKT time. And it was kind of a funny situation because in the hindsight we saw that we were not really good with TAKT production at that point, but we were able to gain a really good benefits from implementing it. So we were thinking that, okay, if we are able to do so good with so many problems still within the process, so the question was, what would actually happen if we would be able to tackle all of these problems and learn from these projects, and in the next project to do even better. So we were really interested in which kind of result we would actually get if we would take everything account, what TAKT production needed in order to function really flawlessly. What we also did simultaneously, in addition to looking for this and documenting this project in Finland, we were documenting cases internationally. So for example, with help of Pekka, we looked at cases from USA, Germany, Brazil, and compared these results what we got from the Finnish cases. So the idea was that in addition to just looking cases from Finland, just looking for residential projects and project with 1 day TAKT time, we wanted to look how different projects with different scopes, different sizes, and different kind of cultures work with TAKT production. And what we ended up seeing was that there were a lot of similar insights from these different countries and different project scopes, but of course a lot of differences as well. And these differences were part of something that Olli and Roar actually just discussed before. So for example, TAKT time selection, it really depends on your project scope. It really depends on your implementation maturity, how experienced the people are with TAKT, how fast can you actually go, and which kind of duration reduction you are looking for. And of course, the project culture, for example, how much of a collaboration you need there, how much earlier you need to start bringing people to the if you have really straightforward project where people experience they're working before together, maybe this kind of really early integration is not that critical compared to some other situation. Anyways, based on these results, what we found from the cases, we formed this contribution of this picture. There's a lot of stuff I will walk you through it, but basically this picture forms the first central contribution of my PhD. So the idea of this picture is to communicate which kind of things we need to have in order in place in TAKT production to be able to achieve benefits, especially related to the flow and the process and operations flow that Olli talked before. If I show you. So the things that we have here in this picture is that first on the left, we have so-called domains and drivers, which means that in order to effectively do TAKT production, we need to have certain things in place regarding TAKT planning, TAKT control, and continuous improvement. In TAKT planning, for example, we need to be really deliberate about how we utilize different buffers and which kind of batch size and TAKT times we use, and make sure that we understand how these are working together. In TAKT control, while we're doing TAKT production, we need to understand, for example, how we ensure effective quality management, and for example, how we make sure that everybody in the project has the common situation awareness and understand where the project is going. In addition, we have requirements. For example, we need to be able to integrate the design process, the material, the logistic process with the TAKT production, with the site operations, and as well make sure that everybody on the project on the site are engaged with the plan that we have, and for example, the contracts that we utilize are in line with what we're trying to achieve. These effects, it's demonstrate which kind of different effects the flow we have if we implement these different domains and requirements. There's a lot of things, but in general, I just would like to say that some of the benefits and the biggest benefits that we got, if everything is in place with TAKT production, you're able to reduce the durations, you're able to reduce the waste, you're able to reduce the rework on the process and so on. But at the same time, if you're not experienced with TAKT production, you can also observe some kind of resource fluctuation for the trades. We can observe some kind of increased stress for the workers if everything is not aligned and for example, the people are not integrated or engaged with the process. But with increased maturity, when we gain more experience, we're able to align all of these domains and drivers together with the requirements. Both of the process and operation flow should increase over the time, over the next projects. So if we take a step forward, that was the I would say first year and a half of my PhD, 2019, 2018, where we looked for this first project and basically took the first step in the maturity ladder. And we were able to see how especially doing good TAKT planning and preparation of the work could lead us creating better schedules and lead us to these initial duration reductions and benefits. But as Olli mentioned, one critical question that arose during this project is that how we actually make sure that the trades that work on the site are able to do the work efficiently together. So as mentioned, TAKT production, one of the key ideas that you bring the workers and the trades closer together, you reduce the buffers between these workers, which means that they have to collaborate a lot more to make the things work. So the question is that if we have traditionally, we've had these really hierarchical structures and hierarchical command structures in construction. Is it something that is actually useful for TAKT production? And is it actually something that we should have when we initiate collaboration within TAKT production? And the question arose that could these kinds of collaborative or decentralized structures actually work better with TAKT production than these traditional hierarchy structures that we have had in place before? And by decentralization, I mean that not all, but some of the decision-making power is actually dispersed for the workers and for the trade heads that work really close with the actual construction work. So in addition to just the managers telling the workers what to do, the workers will also actually collaborate and decide and engage by themselves how the work is planned and this is one of the pictures of my second paper and second study which we did for my PhD. There's a lot, it's a schematic picture, so you don't have to understand everything. But basically the idea of the picture is that we took a case study that was, it was not TAKT production case, but it was lean construction, a case that utilized lean. And we did this so-called social network mapping for the study to understand how people actually communicate and make decisions within the case. So what is worthwhile mentioning here is that here in the internal sphere, we have this some kind of let's say sphere of managers that has a lot of information to the workers and the trade heads that are working here close to the operations and close to the construction. But what we actually saw there is that these managers actually spend a lot of time, a lot of effort making the information flow within the site, but actually the decision making is actually already dispersed for the workers and the trade heads in the project, which means that when they're naturally be able to select how they want to make decisions, the workers and the trade heads actually make a lot of decisions, not the manager as the structures maybe imply. So instead of having these hierarchical structures, it doesn't seem to actually align with the natural way of the organizing of the project. You maybe could see construction project management more as a network structure than hierarchical structure, which would enable maybe better collaboration and maybe better TAKT production at some sense. So here's one example how the information and decision-making flow could happen in a centralized project versus decentralized project. So in this example, where we have centralized structures, and for example, on the left, we have a locksmith, on the right, we have a person doing HVAC work, and they need to collaborate something together. For example, decide how they align the schedule during the production. If you have centralized structures, the locksmith first has to connect his trade head foreman, then he or she contacts the project manager of the locksmith work. He or she contacts the site manager, then contacts the other site manager, contacts the project manager of the HVAC work, contacts the foreman of the HVAC work, and then the information and the decision or the request passes to the worker. And to get the decision right and communicate the thing to the other way, it takes additional 7-8 steps in order, or in contrast to situation where we would have decentralized structures where these two persons could just decide the thing together, and then if it's a minor thing, they would just communicate the thing to the foreman and to the project manager. So the idea here is that when we have more decentralized structures, these small things, these small adjustments that has to happen in TAKT production every day or even every hour, if you have short TAKT time, bring more transparency. It brings more problem-solving capacity. It increases the communication effectiveness, and we also see in the study that it also lowers the stress and increases the sense of autonomy for the workers if it implemented in the right way in the process. So, of course, this wasn't a TAKT project. This was a project that had several other lean methods. So the next question naturally arose that how this kind of decision-making structure of decentralization could work with TAKT production case, which we actually did in 2020. So I was a researcher in this case, which was an industrial case where the company was building in the central Finland. They were building a new warehouse for the industrial site, and they wanted to implement TAKT production or test TAKT production in the interior phase of this case. And the need for TAKT production and decentralized TAKT production came into a situation that the project was already running late. The desired duration was around 22 weeks, but it was scheduled or estimated to be almost 30 weeks because of the earlier delays in the procurement and other things. What we did and what the company did, they did TAKT plan for 17 weeks. And at the end, they were actually able to achieve the TAKT schedule of 20 weeks, be able to deliver the project on time. So achieving significant benefits or decreases in the duration while also making the workers and the trades happy and the client happy in the process. What was also worthwhile mentioning is that during this production, around halfway of the production, COVID-19 happened. So there were a lot of other problems at the side as well, and they were still be able to manage the desired deadline, which was considered really, really good achievement for the project at the time. So in addition to TAKT production, we implemented the decentralized decision making for this case, which basically mostly meant that in the TAKT planning phase, in addition to having the managers discussing how to form the TAKT plan, we also engaged all of the workers all of the trade heads into the planning process and made sure that they were engaged in the planning, but they were also able to input their own ideas and autonomously plan their work within the wagons. So the idea was that the big structure is mostly managed by the managers, but then what happens within the wagons is something that the workers and the trade crews can decide by themselves, and then it's collaborated or coordinated together. And the results that we saw were really good. The people were really interested in having this kind of more responsibility or possibility of having autonomy within the process. And what we also saw that this so-called operations flow also increased, even though this was their first case. So as I mentioned before, sometimes in the first TAKT cases, there is a problem that the operations flow actually decreases or stays the same. But here with the decentralization, we were able to achieve also increased operations flow at the same time, in addition to increased process flow. Of course, what is worthwhile mentioning here is that implementing these kind of decentralized structures, it's not for everybody. It's not easy to do really well at the first time, but it requires the right team. It requires the right mindset, the right people to actually change this idea of managing the work differently. But what we saw in the case is that when we have the mindset to do it, the results can be really good and help the whole process, help the process flow, help the client, but at the same time also benefit the workers meanwhile. So the last part that I would like to talk today is moving a little bit of, I would say, up on the scale and discuss that after finding these really good individual success stories, what is something that we can do to make TAKT actually scale and make sure that the whole industry actually follows and is able to gain all of these benefits that we have seen in individual projects. And one really big question that I've been looking for myself for the last year and a half, maybe a little bit longer, is that maybe including client in the process as well, aligning the client in addition to having the site personnel and the designers and the logistics workers in the process could actually be something that helps us gain benefit from the larger scale as well. And that is something that I've been looking for in my current position as well. So just a little bit of terminology. So when I talk about CM, construction management consultant, I talk about a person who is hired by the client and helps the client to run the project as a project manager or the client representative. And this is something that I actually do in my current work. So the idea is that the construction management consultant or the client by themselves, they maybe don't need to do TAKT production by themselves heavily, but more act as a mediator or facilitator that supports the project to succeed with TAKT. The picture on the right, unfortunately, I'm sorry, is finished, but I'm going to walk through the steps how the construction management or the client can help a project to succeed. So basically, the first thing that has to take in account by the project manager or the client or the construction management consultant is, of course, make the decision if we want to use TAKT in a project or not. And this is something that should be done early as possible. If we introduce TAKT really on the late phases of the project, it usually means that we are able to gain some kind of benefits, but the benefits are usually smaller. For example, it's not that easy to integrate the TAKT plan with the design or with the logistics if we decide to do TAKT only like maybe a few months before the production begins. So if we as project managers can decide early as possible that we want to do TAKT, it makes it possible to define the scope of the TAKT implementation and the metrics for TAKT production implementation much easier. And as already mentioned by Olli, TAKT production can be suitable for every kind of project with every kind of scope. The bigger question is that if the team of the project and the mindset is something that supports TAKT. I think that's the bigger question than that, which kind of the process actually by itself is. The second task that the management should do is to ensure that the prerequisites for doing TAKT production are in place. So it means that we need to make sure that the delivery model, for example, is appropriate for TAKT production, which means that the contracts that we form are aligned with the needs of TAKT production, that they allow us to increase the flow, that we are able to have resources for train the parties, for example, contractors to work with TAKT, and making sure that we have the resources to actually do really efficient TAKT planning and TAKT control throughout the process. And lastly, what we can do, we can make sure that during the implementation, everything is set in place and we are following the right metrics to do TAKT. And there is no right or wrong way how the management can support TAKT production. Sometimes, for example, as Olli mentioned, this BMW from Germany, they are really rigid. They have really straight guidelines of how they want to do TAKT in their own project, which is totally fine. As a client and construction manager, they can of course decide how much they want to be involved. But I just want to say that even though you don't have really straight up rigid way of doing TAKT as a client, you can still work with TAKT and you can still act more as a facilitator and make sure that people who are actually working on the site has the right resources. So some kind of combination or balance between these two approaches is usually appropriate. And when doing TAKT for the few times a client or construction manager, you can actually see what role fits best for you. So to wrap it up, I would just like to tie this learning and these three different stories that I've been looking for the maturity model that Olli already brought up. So these learnings that I have gotten myself are actually quite of the same learnings that the Finnish construction industry has gotten in the last few years regarding that. So in that sense, if you try to think as of this learning as a bit of generalizable results and something that could be applied in the bigger scale as well. What we first did, and I did, we were looking for the first initial projects, looking for how successful implementation of TAKT could happen, what were the drivers and barriers for these individual cases that we had, and especially focused on the TAKT planning and forming the plan for TAKT. But after that, we saw that it requires a bit more than just doing a good plan for doing TAKT production. We need to take a little bit more holistic perspective, think about how going from planning, just for planning, to actually managing the whole production, think about how we integrate different parties and how we initiate collaboration between the projects is something that we need to have in place to go faster and have better TAKT production. Moving up, in order to actually make change and make TAKT as something that actually makes change as a whole in the industry, we need to think more of this strategic alignment and think about how the managers and the client are involved in the process for them to be able to actually help the site people to help succeed with TAKT. And I presented you a few ideas. If you're working as a construction management consultant or as a client, those are a little bit of guidelines that you can take in account or maybe think about while you do TAKT in order to help your project succeed in the future TAKT cases. My last slide, I just wanted to show a little bit of advertisement. So our company with the Finnish Association of Civil Engineers, we have just published a couple of months ago around 50-page TAKT production guide, which provides you the basic for doing TAKT and seeing how different roles in TAKT production operate. Unfortunately, this is only in Finnish. It can be downloaded here in real.fi/tahti-opas, but at least Pekka mentioned me that if you use Google Translate, it actually gives you quite good results, and you can actually still gain quite a lot of information just doing the translation from Finnish to Norwegian or English. Okay, that was my part. So thank you so much.